Okay, hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to day 5 of our JavaScript class. So previously, last week, we kind of went through, we breezed through the basic syntax and some little method and some little concepts about JavaScript, right? We talked about the syntax, the variables, the data types that we have, arrays, object functions, right? So I think we just kind of gave basic examples about most of all of them. So I think we did some work on conditionals and loops on Thursday, right? So we saw how to use if else statements based on comparison operators and conditions, right? We are going to move into something else today, right? We're going to be moving into DOM. And if we can remember the first slide, I talked about how to, what's it called? JavaScript, how to run JavaScript code, right? So JavaScript is a programming language, right? There are basically two ways to run JavaScript, right? So you can run JavaScript as a program in the console. That's what we're going to be focusing on after we handle DOM, because we're going to come back to our variables, functions, and arrays and methods. We're going to be building a whole lot of programs, right? But I want to show us how to, because we've done HTML and CSS, but I want to show us how to output or use JavaScript to manipulate a HTML file on the web page, right? So there are two ways to kind of run JavaScript programs or use JavaScript, right? We can write a JavaScript program with functions, objects, arrays, and create some little cool stuff, right, that we're going to do. And it will just be outputting the response or results in the console, right? Or we can use JavaScript to manipulate the web, right? So what we want to talk about today is DOM manipulation and events, right? How the power, I think that's the major power of JavaScript on the web, right? How to use JavaScript to manipulate everything you see on this web page or in a HTML document, right? So we are going to see some basic usage of most of the concepts we talked about, and we're going to kind of do some examples, right? So again, we're going to talk about DOM maybe for 2 days, today and a little bit of tomorrow, DOM and events. Then we're going to focus on using everything we've learned so far, right? Because that's what we'll be doing when we get to maybe Apex or Salesforce, right? We're going to be practicing everything we've learned, the objects, arrays, functions, loops, and conditions. We're going to be using them to build programs, right? We're going to be using them to build programs to the console, right? But I just want everyone to know about DOM. If you don't know about DOM here, we're going to talk about DOM today. And about I kind of put up some exercise. I wanted to say this about the maybe assignments or tasks. I kind of put together some exercise. I was going to release it out on Friday to be submitted on Sunday, but there was I think I didn't want to kind of put too much pressure because of those of us doing admin, right? So the deadline was supposed to be on Sunday. So I just held back. I'm going to send it out today or probably in the morning, right? So week 1, maybe exercise or practice exercise, I'm going to kind of send it out today or tomorrow because I just put a pause on it because of the admin class. So yeah. With that being said, let's just go into what we have for today, right? So DOM manipulation and events. I'm just going to go to the DOM section and explain what the HTML DOM is, right? Okay, so so one of the coolest functionalities of JavaScript in the web is the ability to manipulate the HTML document, right? So I'll be switching between my editor and my browser, right? I already have my VS Code open. So this is basically our HTML document. We did this last month, and I guess everyone understands what all this means. So yeah, with the DOM, the word DOM stands for Document Object Model, right? So your HTML file, your whole HTML file, your head tag, HTML body, p tags, are all loaded in the browser, right? What the browser does, I told us the first week of HTML, right, that the browser reads these files, passes this file, and displays it on the web page or the browser for you to see, right? So what it does, it kind of reads this into memory and saves it as a tree of object, right? So let me just read through some definitions and I'll explain. With HTML, the JavaScript can access and change all the elements of an HTML document, right? So it doesn't matter what we do here. Let me just make this increase this. It doesn't matter what we do here or whatever you write here. With JavaScript, with what you attach to the ending of the page, you can change whatever content you want to change and manipulate whatever style you want to manipulate just with JavaScript, right? When the web page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page, right? So this is a very, very, very like useful example of what happens, right? So you finish writing your, excuse me, I'm coming. This is capital letter P tag. Let's not fall into issues. Okay, let's say you finish writing your HTML in this document, right? Before the browser displays it, it loads it up in what we call the DOM tree, right? So basically, this is just like a very basic explanation of how the tree looks, right? The document is the whole HTML file, maybe your file. Then it has the root elements, HTML. So this is just how the browser loads it, right? This is the root element, HTML. Let me just collapse it. Then it has, please, if you know, everyone, can you mute? Yeah, thank you. So it has the root elements, then the head and body element. If you can see, the head and body elements are directly under the root element. So if I go back, we're going to see the head element and the body element, right? So basically, this is your file, right? This is what you wrote in your code editor. And this is how, like, what the browser just does, it creates this tree or this object-like node in memory, right? This is how it now helps, or this is how it displays the page, and it allows JavaScript to access each of the elements, right? I'm going to try to explain this more, right? So if you look at the head tag, you have all the elements. So they just listed out two, right? It will have all the elements you have in the head tag. I have meta, like a whole lot of meta tags and my title. So in a nutshell, right, to help you understand the HTML DOM, basically the HTML DOM is just the browser converting your HTML file to an object in memory. We're going to see that when we start using JavaScript to practice, right? It converts the whole HTML file to an object. So you're going to see the use of when we were using object methods. You're going to see you can apply so many methods to the HTML DOM to access and change its elements, right? So I'm just going to go down. With the object model, JavaScript gets all the power it needs to create dynamic HTML, right? Because if the browser has taken a plain HTML file and converted it to what JavaScript understands, right? An object. We all know what an object is in JavaScript. Stuff like this with key value pairs, and you can apply methods to them, right? So JavaScript can change all the HTML elements of the page, right? I'm just going to be reading. Let me just be reading. Okay, JavaScript can change all the HTML elements of the page, can change all the attributes, CSS, right? We can also change the style, right? So if this button is green, I can use JavaScript to change the color to yellow, right? Can change attributes, HTML events, and so on and so forth, right? So we're going to learn how to change HTML elements, CSS of HTML elements, DOM events. We're going to talk about events and how to add or delete HTML elements, right? So before I go further again, I'm just going to try to explain these three and how, or maybe like the object model again, right? So DOM means document object model. It just, in a nutshell, is just your whole HTML file. Doesn't matter what is in the file, images, links, pages, converted to a JavaScript object, right? So once it's converted to a JavaScript object, you can easily access any element, right? So we've been doing this all along. Some people have been asking about it. So this is just like a basic example, right? So if I just show you an example before I move forward, and I do let documents. Can I use document as a variable here? Equals to document.get elements. We're going to see how to use all the methods and all the API names, right? But let me just show you something in the console. Document.get elements by tag, not element. Document.get elements by tag name. Let me use tag name. Right? Console.log document. Right. So if I've not gone live. So if I click on go live and check my console, document has already been declared, right? Let me see. So document I can't use the variable document. Let me see. I mute. Okay, that's not what I want. Let me just actually do document.body, so I'll explore time to explain. Yeah, so basically, right, so this is just what I wanted to explain, right? This is our HTML file, right? This is our body tag, right? And our body tag has, let's say we built a web page, our body tag has all our not necessarily just P tags, all our HTML element, right? In JavaScript, once this page is loaded, right, we have our JavaScript appended, right? We can access everything in the HTML file from the document object, right? So I just console.log document.body, right? So I just console.log document.body, which is just the body of the HTML page. And you can see that we have access to every element in the HTML file, right? So this is from JavaScript. So with this, this is how you can maybe access everything. You can even add a script tag from JavaScript, right? So I just console.log document.body, but I can console.log the whole document, right? If I console.log the whole document, it's going to show everything from the HTML tag to the head tag and body tags included, right? So I was just trying to go ahead and just show you how JavaScript has access to your whole document, like your HTML document, right? So we're just going to go ahead. Yeah, so the HTML DOM is a standard object model and programming interface for HTML, right? It defines the HTML elements as object, right? So this whole HTML element, the browser helps us convert it to an object. I've already said that we can access it as an object and play around with it, right? The same way we can access object methods, right? If you remember, if we created an object user, we could do user dot maybe first name or last name or stuff like that. Same way I can do document.html, right? If I check this, I should have, okay, it doesn't have the HTML, but let me see document. Let me see how it's named. HTML. Okay, can't access HTML, but I can access body, right? And head. Yeah, I can access body. Let me see if I can access head. I think I can also access head, right? So the DOM, like the document, the DOM just kind of loads up the whole HTML element and saves them as object, right? So the methods to access all HTML elements, right? The event for all HTML elements, right? So in other words, the DOM the HTML DOM is a standard for how to get, change, add, or delete HTML elements, right? So before I go to the next page, this is just like a summary of what DOM means. Again, DOM means document object model. Standard is a standard for how to get, change, add, or delete the HTML element, right? So if I've just been consoling this, I can, let's say, the same way we've outputted most of our examples recently or last week. Let me just clear all this. I can just do, let's say, document, get element by ID. The ID is display, right? Then I can change the inner HTML, right? So remember, we access methods on objects with the dot sign, right? So these are all methods. And again, if you look closely, this is a function, right? But we're going to get into that maybe when we go into like the DOM APIs, right? The inner HTML equals hello world, right? If I do this, I'm going to be changing the value of the inner HTML of this p tag, right? We already saw how this works last week. If I check this, I've practically manipulated that whole element, right? I can also do, let me see if I can change the CSS. Let me see what I applied as CSS. Color. Yeah, so let me do .style .color, right? Equals to, I'm going to change it to blue, right? So if I do this, the font color should change to blue. Can we see this, right? So I didn't change the text this time. It still like brought up this text, but I used JavaScript to change the CSS, right? I can add a class, right? So we know how classes work, right? I can just come here and create a class name, dynamic, right? Dynamic, right? And I'll put the color as purple. So if I refresh this, go to my page, it's not going to, like, nothing's going to happen, right? Because like we all know, my HTML element doesn't have a class of dynamic, right? If I had code the class here, dynamic, right? And take this off because I'm already appending blue here. I'm doing a whole lot of things and I'm already appending orange here. So if I take all this off, save, my text is going to have a color of purple, but I'm going to take that off, right? I want to do it from JavaScript. So if I take this off, I'm just showing us how we can manipulate HTML from JavaScript. If I take this off, save, my text is black now, default, right? If I go to my JavaScript file, and previously I added a color directly, right? But I can add a class, right? So I can do document.getInMyIDisplay.class list, right? So these are just methods. We're going to kind of like go through all of them. I'm going to add dynamic, right? Let's see if this works. If I save, we can see I have a style, I have a CSS rule for a class of dynamic. My index, my p tag doesn't have a class of dynamic. I used JavaScript to add a class of dynamic, and it added all those styles to it, right? So these are just kind of like literally two commands we have access to with JavaScript to manipulate our HTML file, change the style. I can delete these elements. I can change the contents, like what's in here, and I can get the value of the ID. So for those of us that are asking some question about how to use JavaScript to do dynamic stuff, using DOM manipulation is one of them, right? You can play around with your whole HTML file and do cool stuff with JavaScript, right? But we're going to get into all those very soon. So I'm just going to go to the next page. Yeah, and we're going to talk about DOM methods, right? So if you can remember, if I scroll back up to where we had objects, or not just objects, right? But even all data types, if you can remember, all JavaScript data types has methods, right? So I said methods are additional actions or extra functionalities we can perform on objects, right? So we can see numbers have methods, strings have methods, array methods, and object methods, right? So HTML DOM also have methods, right? Because it's an object like data type. Excuse me. Yeah, so the HTML DOM methods are actions, okay, you can perform on HTML elements, right? I've already demonstrated a few. I've changed, I've changed color, I've changed style. I can look. Let me see. Let me. I think I didn't try one. I can remove the same way you can add edit. I can remove a class, right? So class dynamic. Let's say. Hello. Please, can we just stay? Please, everyone just stay mute so I don't get distracted. When we want to take questions, everyone can speak. Thank you. What was I doing? Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to take this off, right? I'm going to not add the dynamic class dynamically from JavaScript, right? So I'm going to come to HTML, right? So I have the class here directly dynamic. If I save this and go to the web page, it's supposed to, did I spell it right? Okay, I didn't spell it right. Dynamic. So if I save this and go to the web page, I'm going to see that the style for dynamic is applied, right? So, but what I want to show now, the same way we can add, remove, we also have delete or destructive commands, right? So I can do document.get by id class list.remove, right? And I'll remove the dynamic. So if I save this now, we had dynamic class, or we have it in our HTML. But when the JavaScript is loaded, I removed the dynamic class, right? So if you can see, the color purple has been unapplied from the text, right? So you can do all this. You can do all this stuff, like mustn't be written like this. We're going to see all those later. You can use conditions, right? Same thing I was trying to explain last week. You can use condition, like if a certain condition is true. Oh, okay, this certain condition is true. I want the dynamic class to be removed, or I want to add a class or stuff like that. You can do a loop, maybe for blah, blah, blah. If you do the loop, then if this particular record is from, let's say, maybe training schedule or Black Force website, do this, change the color of this to this, right? Or if project is submitted, stuff like that. So this is how you can programmatically change stuff. Again, we're going to focus on that maybe after from Wednesday. We're going to focus on how to use those stuff we've learned. I think from Wednesday we'll be doing more of exercises and building little programs, right? But for now, let's just see how to use JavaScript to play around with the HTML document, right? So HTML DOM methods are actions you can perform on HTML element, right? So HTML DOM properties are values of HTML element that you can set or change. This is just trying to explain what I've already kind of verbally explained in the past lesson, right? The HTML DOM can be accessed with JavaScript. In the DOM, all HTML elements are defined as objects. The programming interface is the properties. The programming interface is the properties and methods of each object, blah, blah, blah. So I've talked about this in the previous lesson, right? So a method is an action you can perform, is an action you can do, like add or delete an HTML element, right? If I go back to my code editor and bring this back, you can just see I've used multiple methods and I changed multiple methods, right? So this is a method. This is a method. This is a method. So it's similar to what we had, right? So if you can remember, if I create an array now, const array equals, let's say, I'm still going to use our famous examples, Saab, Ford, BMW, right? So if you remember, to get the length of the array, I can do array.length, right? So this is a method, right? So methods are additional functionalities on a data type, right? So this is an array. The document model is an object. So all these methods can be chained to the document object, right? So you see how we are building on top previous concepts, right? If I go, so we're going into examples now, right? The following example changes the contents the inner HTML of the P element with ID demo. So this is just exactly what we've been playing around with since. If I click on try it yourself to see the example, this is just a basic HTML, right? HTML body and P tag ID of demo, but there's no content. But with JavaScript, they just the document.get elements by ID demo, which is this element, and set the inner HTML to hello world, right? So as expected, it outputs hello world. If I change this and run it, it's going to change to hello. So this is how you manipulate. This is one of the common or easiest, let me not say easiest, this is one of the common ways you can just change, or this is one of the common things you can do with DOM, right? You're going to be changing text a lot, right? You're going to be changing text a lot, like maybe good morning user, good afternoon user. Maybe if you're building softwares, good morning. If it's when it's afternoon, yeah, that should be a typical example, right? So I can have maybe a greeting text, right? Let me change this to H1. No, H6, H3. Good morning, Sammy, right? So let's say maybe this is our dummy program, right? It's not like full-fledged. Maybe this is a user on like a greeting on the user nav, but I can change morning to afternoon or evening. I can change the text depending on the time of the day, right? So if you remember in JavaScript, we have dates, right? I can do new dates and get the dates and maybe get, let's say get day, right? I can get hours. I think we did this the last time. So with that, I can conditionally check what the time of the day is and just display an appropriate greeting, right? So let me just see if I can quickly do that. Day, no, sorry, hours. 20, yeah. So let me just try it, right? So since we've been playing around with manipulating text, right? Let me just give you like one practical example, right? So I'm going to say let's time of day. This is me creating a variable equals to new dates dot get hours, right? So I can say if time of day is greater than 12, I think 12 is noon, is greater than or, so is less than or equal to, I know 12 is noon, but I'll just keep it as morning, 12. I'm going to get this text, right? Let me give it an ID of greeting. Document.get element by ID inner HTML equals. Instead of good morning, Sammy, I can change. Okay, yeah, it should still be good morning, Sammy. Or rather still, I can just change this text, but I don't want to get into that now. So let me just go one step at a time. Else, if, remember, we can change if statement. If time of day is greater than or equal to 12, let me just do greater than 12. So 1 p.m. will be afternoon from 1 p.m. I'm going to copy this, paste, and I'm going to change it to good afternoon, Sammy, then else, the last condition. So it should be later than morning and afternoon, right? If I paste this, it should show good evening, Sammy, right? So this is just like off the top of my head, a dummy application you can just use to change text content, right? You can just easily use to change text content. Why is it telling me good afternoon? Oh, I didn't put a boundary on this, right? So our HTML element has good morning, Sammy, but once the JavaScript is loaded, because of the dynamic stuff I put to get time, is changing to good afternoon, Sammy. But again, there's a bug in our application. I said if time of day is 20, is greater than 12. So these are the kind of things you're going to face. And 20 is always greater than 12. What I did not do is I did not put a boundary, and less than 6 p.m. should be 18. and less than, why is it giving me an error? If time of day is greater than 12 and time of day, sorry, is less than 18. Good afternoon, else good evening. So I should have good evening, Sammy, based on the time of day, right? So this is just like literally two practical example of how you can use like JavaScript methods and if statements with changing text content, right? And we're going to see that a whole lot as we move forward. Okay. Yeah, so we've played around with get element by ID. There are more, right? There are class names and all that. We're going to get all of them. So the get element by ID method. The most common way to access an HTML element is to use the ID of the element. In the example above, the get element by ID method used ID demo to find the element. Then this other property we've been calling, right? So basically, right, they made the commands and the method pretty descriptive, right? So documents is your whole HTML document. Dots, I want to get an element by ID, very descriptive. So again, this brings back what we've learned, right? Functions. I won't want to go into how this is implemented, but you should know that this is a function. We played around with function, but this is a browser declared or a program like is inbuilt in JavaScript web APIs, right? We declared function. Let me declare our own custom get element by ID, right? So maybe demo. So this is just what was done, right? So, but we are appending it to the, what's it called? To the documents object. I don't want to get into this, but what you should know is on the document object, we have this function, right? Then we have this property dot inner HTML. So this will just know how it's going to do and change the inner text of the elements, right? So this is the object model, like document object model DOM. Then these are all methods and property, or all methods attached to the DOM, right? So the inner HTML property, the easiest way to get the content of our elements is by using inner HTML property. There are other ones we can use. Let me change this to text if text works for this. Text content. Let me see if text content works. Yeah, text content still works, right? But these are just the most common and easiest you can use. Don't worry about if maybe you're feeling like it's too much terminologies. You're going to get comfortable with all of them once we start using them daily, right? So that's why I advise we kind of take our time to practice, right? To do some practice. So if I go to where is it? If I go here now, I'm going to, tutorials and JavaScript exercises. I always look for that stuff. Okay, it's somewhere here, but I can't seem to find it right. It's okay, exercises here. JavaScript exercises. Yeah. So if you come here with constant practice, right, it's going to just make you learn all the whole commands and function. Like if I go to JS DOM and go to exercise 1, you're going to see it's going to be helping you. You see, so use the get element by ID method. I'm just going to do document.get element by ID, and I'm going to pass this, right? So there are a whole lot of methods for you to kind of know them. You need to like kind of practice constantly, right? So the HTML property is useful for getting or replacing the content of HTML elements, right? So the inner HTML property can be used to get or change any HTML elements, including HTML and body. Yeah, so I've just been doing for p tag. Let me show you something. You can manipulate any elements in the HTML document, right? So if I do, let's say this is my document body, right? And I have a p tag with Lorem Ispoon, and I duplicate it to 3. If I go to my browser, I should have, why do I say I have good morning, Sammy? Okay, it's here. Sorry. If I go to my document, I should have like a full HTML page, right? I'm just going to reduce this, a full HTML page. I can change the whole content of the whole document, right? I can do documents.body equals dot inner HTML equals by, like, and to wipe out everything on the whole document and just put by, like, I just replaced everything in my HTML document, right? So the same way you can manipulate just one. In fact, all of what you should know is all of them are elements, right? Document.get element, this is an element, this is a HTML element. Remember, we learned that HTML elements HTML elements have opening and closing tags, right? You can manipulate all of them, okay? Yeah, so I'm going to just, okay, so I think I'll take a pause here. Let's see if you have any questions, or if you have any questions so far about the HTML DOM, you can just put your hands up and we'll take questions one after the other. Okay, hi Ola.
Hi, good evening, guys. So my question is that, you know, the HTML, we can have like, let's say 10 pages on a website, and then it's the linking between pages and pages that make the website. So if we want to use, say, JavaScript to like affect them, let me say that. You've been using only document. Does it allow maybe you taking the names of the file, the HTML? Is it possible to do that?
No. So that's a good question, right? So Ola is asking, or let me rephrase the question so Ola will confirm if I'm correct, right? You're asking, what if I have 10 HTML files and I append the same JavaScript to the 10 of them, right? Or different JavaScript files. So is that correct, Ola?
Yeah, that's correct. But how do we like tell the JavaScript that it's this particular HTML file that we want perfect?
So, okay, that's cool. So how I'll answer your question is, right, so whatever you reference to this HTML file, so again, you're going to have to be careful, and you're going to see errors and learn from errors, right? Whatever JavaScript file you link to this HTML page controls or has access, let me not say controls, has access to the whole document object model or the whole DOM of this page, right? So if I have 5 files, let me create index2 HTML, and I auto-generate HTML file and append the same script tag, right? So this script tag, as long as it's appended to this page, has access to the DOM of this page. So long this script tag is also appended to this page, it has access to this whole page, right? So if I come to this place and do document.getElement by ID greeting, it's going to look for the first one it has access to. So that's why you have to be careful. If you know what you're doing, unless you know what you're doing, you don't kind of, each HTML page should have its own HTML file, but should have its own JavaScript file, right? But you can share across files if you know what you're doing. So if you do this and you have the same, what's it called? You have the same p tags. Let me take this off caps lock. You have the same p tag with the same ID of greeting. Let's see how it behaves as you've asked now. Lorem. Right? Lorem ID greeting. Yeah, ID greeting. Documents. Document.getElement by ID greeting. So we have greeting in index 1, greeting in index 2, the same JavaScript file, right? So it's changed the one for index 1 or the main index. Let me see index 2. Yeah. So if you have the same JavaScript file, right, it's going to have access, basically it's going to have access to the DOM, and whatever command you put is going to manipulate it on the page. So it's changed the ID greeting for the both files, but if this file didn't have ID greeting, it's going to throw error for this file, but it's going to work for this file. So if I check my console, I'm going to see an error in my console, right? If I go to the main HTML now, it will have changed. If you remember, this is supposed to say good morning, Sammy, but it changed it to hi. But for the index 2, it's going to throw an error because it can't find an element with greeting. Okay, so you just have to be careful. Except you know what you're doing, you can use the same script tag for 2 HTML files. But basically, if you link a script file to a HTML file, the JavaScript has access to the whole that particular HTML file and you can manipulate it. So you can use one for 10 files, but you have to be careful to just reference maybe what you're looking for. Is that okay, Ola?
That answers it. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi, Omo.
Hi, Sammy. Okay, so Sammy, please, I'm trying to understand functions, right? And I know that you used it now when you were saying get element and then you called the function. So like when you have a function, like, they have different properties. You first have, I can't remember what you called it, but there is a name we call each one of the properties. Right. So when you displayed get element this, get this, then you changed it again to get document dot. Like, I just want to know, you said you called the function. Can you open up the JavaScript, please? Oh, yeah. Okay. So this wasn't the one. Maybe you deleted that one already, I think.
This one?
Yes. Okay. So how does function work? I'm sorry if you have said this many times before, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. Can you please explain how function works with this sentence and then what you need to change to get the result you need? Do you understand my question?
Can you rephrase the last part again, like the actual question?
Okay. So like, how does you want to call, this document, right? Yeah. You are telling JavaScript that it should go to a particular document, right?
Yeah.
Okay, to get this element, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that in the HTML, there is an element called greeting.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Then dot text content. What's this dot text content? What does it mean? And then I just want you to explain each property of the line.
Well, see what I'm going to do to help you. Then I'll explain how JavaScript has access to this document object and its method. Right?
Thank you.
I'm going to create our own dummy document or our own dummy object, right? So I'm sure all of us are comfortable with this, right? This is an object, right? So let me do first name. I always like first name and last name. Sammy, then last name. My last name, right? So let me put a method here. Full name. Should I pass in something for this example? Yeah, let me just pass it in, right? Let me just hard code it. I can do return. Let me pass in Sammy. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I just want to explain. No. Return this dot first name, this dot last name. I'm just trying to explain something to you, right? So let's say this is a document object, right? Excuse me. Let's say this is a document object, right? Remember I said the document, the DOM, like when the browser reads this file, it converts everything here to an object, and JavaScript has access to that object. We did not define this object. The document object is a global, we call them global variables, right? It's freely accessible, it's a global, the same way you access if statements, like if command, if keyword, or let, or function, right? Is a global keyword, right? So it's an object that's already created for you. But this is a manual or a custom example of that object. So let's say we want to output, let me output console.log user dot full name, right? So this get element by ID is a function in this object, right? So they allowed you pass a parameter. I'm going to get to that, but I am just going to show you that I can have a function in an object that plays around with data and returns an output, right? So if I do console.user.fullname, if I try this, let me take this off. It's console be my last name, it's supposed to console my full name. Return this dot. Okay, sorry. Just give me a minute on that. This return my full name now, right? Sammy Woko. So as you can see, I've created a custom object and I have a function in it that does something and returns a value. Same goes with this document object, right? So this is an object the browser created for us. When I console.log this document, you saw head, body, it has access to all this in its object, right? So the head is like, the head is like first name. The body is like last name, and all of them has properties. They are nested objects, right? Then it has multiple methods. If I take this out, I'm going to see get element by class name, query selector. There are many of it, but I'm just showing you here that I can create an object, append the function to it, and the function will play around with data, right? So the reason I can return first name and last name is because I have access to first name and last name in my object. Same thing goes for the document object. It has all the elements. It has every element in the document, right? So they created an inbuilt function called get elements by ID. It passes the name of the ID. So it just do similar to what I did here, search for the element and return it. Then you can still perform other methods on that element. So this is me just trying to go a little bit more deeper. But what you should know is this is an object. An object can have functions as method, as I've showed to you now. So if you can see, I created full name and I can pass in, let me see, I can pass in an element, an argument right now. I don't know why this is giving me an error. Okay. Yeah, so basically, what you should understand is this is an object that was created for you. An object can have functions as methods. So this is a function. It returns an object, and this is a method on that object. So don't try to understand how it works behind the scene, right, or underneath the scene, right? You're going to maybe get comfortable with that later, but just know that you can chain methods, right? So previously we had arrays. Maybe if I don't have any array, I can do array.length or array or something, but know that you can change these methods because these guys have all these methods appended to them. So if I do document.query selector, it's still the same thing, maybe with ID or class of Sammy, then I can perform all these other methods on it, right? So what you should focus on now is try learning how they work, right? And how you can change them and know they have methods appended to each other. Then maybe later you're going to get comfortable with how they work internally, right? But again, just know they have functions in them that do stuff and returns stuff, right? So returns an element. This document has access to all your HTML elements. You can perform functions on it and do other stuff with it, right? So we're going to focus on maybe learning how to maybe call them and chain them and get the results we want, okay?
Okay, thank you so much, Sammy. But just a quick one. Can you please go back to your the JavaScript again? Okay, so this object that you have down here, when you have const user, right? And you have full name function. So right here now, what's the name of the function that you have here?
Full name.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Sagal?
Yeah, hi, Sammy. I have a question about if we go back to the VS Code, there is the date one. You said new date. Is that like creating a separate function?
Okay. We talked about this. So that is like, remember I said everything has its syntax and keywords, right? So that's how you work with date. So if I go here, I think we skipped date. So if I go to JS date, I'll just click on it. Can you see the syntax to create a date in JS, right? So it's Java, it's a Java.
Okay.
So or new date is going to return the current date with time, seconds, milliseconds, and time zone for you. Okay, so it's a JavaScript command, new date. It can return year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Are you raising up your hands again, or it's
yes, yeah. Please go to your JavaScript again. I just wanted to be sure of something. Okay, so does it mean where you have this function, you can decide to declare the name of your function in the bracket, or because right here now, if you had put greetings into full name you have here is the function, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but then you could still have put something into the bracket. What's yeah. No, not by the console log. I mean line 17.
Yeah.
So the name of your
I could have accepted an argument, right?
An argument.
Yeah.
Okay.
Parameter here. Param 1, like we did param 1, param 2.
Oh, right.
And use it, right? If I wanted to. But let me just do that. Let me hard code return param 1. You're going to see param 1 space param 2. If I do it, I call user.get full name. I'm passing the two arguments, right? Sammy and my full name. It should console log it in the console, right? Cannot set property of no certain text content. Where am I doing that? Okay, this is not correct anymore. Right, so I have my full name in the console. So if you use parameters or arguments, you're going to pass it and you're going to use it in the function. So this is just how functions work exactly, but we are using them inside an object. Same goes with how we used it in their own document object.
Okay, thank you so much. It's clearer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, so I think you're still raising your hands. Okay, Omar. Yeah, so we're just going to continue, right? I have gone to date. So basically, right, you can just use this to, if you understand this, we're going to, we're going to, I think from when we finish or when I finish going through this, I'm going to try to create as much practical examples and use cases and exercises as possible, right? So that's just basically what we'll be doing maybe for the next remaining 2 weeks. I will be doing project, assignment, then practical examples, right? Because I need to show you guys how, maybe where or when, or little examples on how these stuffs are used. Then you can just do some little assignment to see how you can think and solve a problem for yourself. But for now, let's just go through the DOM for today and tomorrow, right? So the HTML DOM document object, right? I think I've explained the document object will represent your web page. Again, if you want to access any element in an HTML page, you always start with accessing the document object, right? So this is very important. If I want to access, let's say, these p tags, I don't know why I like p tags, this p tag, right? I can't just jump and say p dots. I think my code is a little bit messy now, right? I can't just jump into my editor and say maybe p dot inner HTML, right? It's not going to work. It's good we already learned the concept of objects. So for you to access any element, you have to know that this full file is converted to an object for you by the browser. Then you have to access everything in it via the document, or everything is inside here. Everything is fine. I think I console logged this earlier on. If I do this again and save, and I go to my browser, I'm going to see the whole, as you can see, if I'm hovering over it, it's coloring the whole page, right? I'm going to see my whole HTML file. So for you to access anything, you have to access it via the document object. That's just what this line is talking about, right? So below are some examples of how you can use the document object to access and manipulate HTML. get elements by ID. Everyone should be comfortable with this. Get elements by tag name. Define all the elements by tag name, right? So if I go to my HTML file, so there are going to be different use cases for this, right? And I'll try to create as much examples and exercises as I can. So these are, like I said, this is an object, and like we saw, object has method, right? So if I do document dot, I'm going to see a whole lot. There are so, I don't know if you guys can see my little window, but there are a whole lot of them. I can create an element, okay? I can create an element. I think I should play around with that, right? I can not only access element, I can empty this whole file and create all the elements I want from my JavaScript file. I've done this a whole lot, right? But I wanted to play with document.get elements by tag name. If I do document.get elements by tag name, and I put P, right? If I console log this, sorry, I didn't save it in a variable. Right, P tags equals console log P tags. And maybe later you can play around with this, or maybe this happens most times if you are trying to, this happens most times if you're trying to maybe get the value of, or maybe you're looking for a text and using P tags, you can just look through all the P tags and just get the exact value you're looking for. Again, in a nutshell, there are many elements that the document object provides for you. You just need to know what you need to do per time and use each of those methods, right? So these are finding HTML elements, right? Get element by ID, get elements by tag name. It will fetch all the P elements and give you can access them via an array or a HTML collection, right? So if I look through this now, I'm going to have access to all the P tags. How many P tags do I have? Let me replicate this. If I save and go, should be, right, yeah, thought that was crazy. Yeah, so I've looked, like I've gotten all the tags, like all the P tags, and I can just play around with them in my code. So changing HTML elements, right? We've already seen the inner HTML, element.inner HTML. So element is mind you, element here is a variable, right? Element.attributes, new value, element.style the property. I played around with this one. So I think there should be a reference for all these, right? Where you can see all these commands, right? But for now, you can just see the most important of them listed out here, right? Element.set attribute value. So if I play around with this, let me do document.get element by ID greeting. Let me see, yeah. Document.get element by ID. Excuse me. But set attribute, right? Class. I want to give it a class of, what's the name of that class? Dynamic, right? So if I do dynamic and save this element should have a class of dynamic, right? I can check that and we can see that my text color has changed to purple again. So there are a whole lot of methods that they provide that we can use to play around with content on the web page. What you can do now, maybe after this class, you can come and just see each of them and test them. But again, I'm going to create more exercises moving forward because we're going to be building programs after done, right? That's our end goal. We're going to start building programs that output stuff, that calculate stuff, that's maybe changing stuff based on input, right? So what you can do, you can just come here and just play around with each of them and see how it works, right? So adding event handlers, we're going to get to event handlers later. So the first, finding HTML objects, let me see if this is too complex to go into, right? So I won't want to touch this because we're not yet comfortable with the basic inner HTML attribute and style and property, right? But here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to just play around with this few that they listed here. Then maybe later we're going to create exercises for more, right? So I've just been playing around with get elements, edit elements, create change text content, right? You can create, in fact, I can build a full HTML page, attach style to it, create hero sections from JavaScript, right? But again, you need to know what you're doing, right? So I can do document.create element, right? Let me say, let's div equals document.create. Firstly, I'm going to take out everything on my HTML file and just leave good morning, Sammy. So if I save this and go to my page, I should have just good morning, Sammy, right? So I'm just going to do document.div is document.create element. Div, no, not video, div, right? So I just created an element. I'm going to explain this. Div.inner HTML equals, let me just generate a lorem is poem. And I'm going to copy and paste that, right? So I'm just showing you the same way we can edit or manipulate inner text content. We can as well create a full HTML file from JavaScript, right? So let's say I'm building a program and I want to create some elements in HTML, right? So div.inner HTML, this text. Then I'm going to append this div to our document object, right? So again, if you remember, or if you understand maybe our objects and variable, right? So remember your HTML document is the document, your HTML file is in this document, right? I just created a new element div. I added a text to the element div.inner HTML, right? But if I take this off now, if I save this and go to my HTML document, I won't see that new div now, right? Why? Because I've not added that div to the document. It's just the same way as saying let's today as a variable equals new date, right? If I do this and I don't console log it, I'm not going to see it as an output, right? Same with what we have here. So if you're creating elements, whatever you do with the elements, and I add div.classList.add dynamic, right? Dynamic, it's still not going to reflect on the web page, but I'm just saving this in memory. Remember, variables are containers to store data or values in memory. So the only way this will appear on my web page is when I add it to my HTML document, right? So I'm just going to document.append child. I'm going to append div. I hope this is the command, right? It is not the command. Okay, let me see. Documents.body.append child. So I think that's the command I'm supposed to use. This should work, hopefully. Yeah, so as you can see, I just created an element from JavaScript and added a class to it that has a style and added it to our HTML document, right? So there are a whole lot of methods that you can use on the document object model, right? Let me see if I can find a reference for it. References, HTML DOM object. So there are a whole of them, right? Documents. Yeah, so you can come here and maybe, but don't come here now, right? I'm just trying to show you that the methods are much, but not all of them are like kind of super important. You can learn most of them later on, but the basics or the ones you're going to use mainly are listed here, right? So JavaScript HTML DOM documents, you can come here and play around with them, right? We just created an element and we used the append to add it to the HTML, right? So I can also do document.remove child, right? So if I want to delete an element or I don't want this to show on the page again, so good morning, Sammy, I can come here and say, let's greeting equals document dot get element by ID greeting, right? Now I have a reference to the element. I'm going to delete that element from the body. Document.body.remove child greeting. Okay, so again, this should delete that element greeting. As you can see, I've taken the good morning, Sammy, and we already have the element we created, right? So if I take this off, let me remove our append child. I'm going to see I have content in my HTML file, right? Good morning, Sammy, but I deleted it with JavaScript. So again, like the name says, document object model, we have the power to manipulate everything on the HTML document with JavaScript, right? There are more powerful stuff we can do, but I always don't like to go into complex stuff at the start. So you can, what we can do right after this class, or what you can do, you can just come back to this reference, right? Or this HTML DOM section and just individually play with each of these commands, right? And play around with their try it yourself, what's it called? Examples. But I am going to, after today and tomorrow, I'm going to create, what we're going to be working on mainly is exercise and questions, and you're going to kind of build softwares, right? So I've worked with create elements, remove child, append child, replace, yeah, we can, this is funny, right? I can replace an element. If I go back, let me just show you something, sorry. If I go back to the DOM tree, right? If you see this, it loads up the whole HTML element as an object, right? And it knows where each element is, right? So if I just, let me just try and show you that. We're going to see use cases for all this later. Then P lorem. And let me not use lorem. Let me use the H1 so it will be visible. H1 first element. I'm going to make it 3. Second element. Third element. Right? I'm going to stop or undo deleting our greeting. And if I load this up, we're going to see first, let me take out good morning, Sammy. I'm going to see first element, second element, third element, right? So what I was trying to explain is JavaScript knows the position of each element in the object, right? And rather than maybe creating an append or delete, I can come, just pick this one and replace this element and just take it off, right? Let's just go back to that example and see how it's done. So it's document.replace child, new, old. I'm going to go to my JavaScript and create a new element, okay? We've already created an element here. Let me just open it up, right? So let div equals document.create element h1. I appended a text to the div.inner HTML. I'm going to leave out the class for now. Then I am going to not only, previously we just appended it now. So if I do this, document.append child div, the last element I created is going to come at the bottom of my page, right? So it's called append, like it's just going to keep on adding it. But cases might come where you want to change a particular section of your page, right? I can do that by using the replace child command. So if I do document.body.replace child, new, I need a reference of the old, right? So ID, second, ID, first, ID, third. So I'm just trying to kind of show more practical or more examples with the DOM methods, right? So for me to replace the second element, I have to have a reference to it, right? Let's second, sorry if I'm confusing a lot of us. Let's second equals to document.get element by ID. I'm getting second, right? If I replace div for second, if I do this, I should have div, or yeah, the element we created in place of the second element, right? Again, just try to familiarize yourself with how this works and how you can maybe use them, replace stuff, get stuff, and stuff like that, right? We're going to work on exercises later, right? We're going to use form fields to just change stuff and just know how to change an element of the web page, change the text. You can go into learning CSS, like how to change the CSS and replace and append elements, right? We're going to create applications that are going to use that. Okay. So I won't want to talk about events listeners now, right? So let me just see. So there are a whole lot of fun stuff you can do with it, right? You can check body element, doc type. This is a cool one, right? Document.domain to return your URL, right? And so on and so forth. Document.images. If we have images, it's going to return all the image elements, right? Then links and other stuff we shouldn't be going into now, right? And again, I can delete this script tag, or I can add more script tags, right? But I don't want to go into that. I just want us to focus on writing to an element, creating an element, and styling an element, right? So I'm just going to go to DOM elements. Okay. So finding HTML elements. Often with JavaScript, you want to manipulate HTML elements, right? To do so, you have to find the elements first. There are several ways to do this. Finding elements by ID, by tag name. We already talked about this, by class name, CSS selector. So I think I've been using get elements by ID most of the time, right? But if you can remember, in our HTML, most times, not all elements have an ID. Most times they have classes. Then sometimes not all elements have classes. But they have maybe the tag, or all elements must have a tag name. So we can get by tags, we can get by IDs, we can get by classes, right? We can get by CSS selectors, right? So, and all of that stuff. So finding HTML elements by ID. This is what we've been using so far. Get elements by ID. Okay. If the element is found, the method returns the element as an object. If the element is not found, element will contain null, right? So I didn't demonstrate this. Let me just show you something. If I take this off now, save, I should have my first, second, and third. And if I go to my HTML, you're going to see I have ID first, second, and third. If I try to access, let's last element, right? Equal to document.get element by ID last. Remember, we don't have any last in our HTML, right? If I console log it, last element, I'm going to receive an error of either null. Yeah, I'm going to get null, like it doesn't exist, right? Same thing with variables. So you could not access that, right? So finding HTML elements by tag name. So all we've done so far is get elements by ID, ID, ID. So this example finds all P elements, right? So if I go back, I think I already demonstrated this and create, okay, I already have H1 elements, right? No need to create P tags. I'm going to change to, let's H1 elements equals document.get elements by tag name, right? And I'm going to name the tag. As you can see, my code editor is giving me options, right? I want to look for H1. So I'm going to get all the tags with all the H1 elements, right? If I console.log it, it's going to give me a node list. So this is what we call a node list, right? So from here, I can access every of the HTML elements. If I'm just going to show you their content, right? So if I do a for loop, let's I equals 0, I select the H1 elements dot length, I plus plus. Log index I. Let me see if this will come. Yeah, so we are getting the actual elements now, right? First element, second element, third element. So we just need to, I just want us to kind of get familiar with the methods. We're going to see practical examples of how to use them, right? I'm going to try to create like use cases for them, but for you can just try learning the what's it called, methods, right? So the example files element with ID main and all, and then finds all. So this is basically what I've done, right? Yeah, so this page just lists out other elements, other ways you can find an element, right? So if you want to find all HTML elements with the same class name, use get elements by class name, right? So I've done for tag name. You can also use class to find an element, right? So if I change this to class now, and all of them has a class of okay, just one first. All of them has a class of first, right? I can do documents.getElements by class name, if you can see this, right? So this method just finds all the elements with a class name of first. So again, based on the question Omo asked, you can see that this document, it has all this stuff. It knows all this stuff, right? It knows where they are. It knows their location. And we've just been calling methods on these documents. I don't know if you've noticed that. The document has a whole lot of methods, right? If you understand it this way, you're going to find it easy to grasp all this, right? The documents object has a whole lot of methods, right? And we've just been calling methods on the document object. So to learn the DOM perfectly, or to kind of get familiar or get comfortable with the DOM, just try and maybe learn, what is it called? Learn most of the methods appended to the document object and you'll be fine, right? So we can get elements by class name first. If I console.log it or loop through it, I'm going to still get the same result, right? H1 first. I think I can console.log this outrightly and get, rather than looping, it's not a node list. Console.log H1 element. Yeah, it's still a node list, the same thing. Yeah, so I can get elements by class name and CSS selectors, right? You can do query selector, right? So this is another cool method. Let me just show you this. I can do document.getElement by class, or sorry, the command is, this is a more, let's say, updated query or finder, right? So if you can remember, in variables we have, and many people ask that question, right? What's the difference between var and let, right? Aside from this being block scope and this being global, I said this was what JavaScript shipped with, right? The very, very first way to declare a variable, right? So get elements by ID, it still works. All those are just like versioning. So query selector is a more modern one, right? If you remember, get elements by ID has to be an ID. So if I do document.getElements by ID, I must put an ID in here. If I put a class name, it won't find anything. Then same with get elements by class name, right? I must put a class name. But the sweet thing about query selector is you can put anything. Okay, let me start with query selector first, not query selector all. I can put in anything. I can say document or query selector, and I put query selector with ID first. Do I have an ID first? Okay, with class, but with class first, right? So, but the thing with query selector, right, you have to tell it what you're looking for. For get elements by ID, it knows it's looking for an ID. But if you're using query selector, the same way we reference IDs in CSS, I'll have to do ID first, or class first, or tag name H1 with class of first. So query selector is more powerful, but you can learn get element by ID and play around with it before you get to query selector, okay? I don't want to go deep into that for now. Yeah, so this is just what I just did. So if you find, let's say we've been doing get elements by ID, if you get one element, you can console log it and you access it directly. But if you query, let's say document.getElement by tag name, it's going to look for all the elements with all the H1 elements. And if you have 100, it's going to return 100 of them. So what you should know is whenever you have, you get elements in plural, like maybe P tags or classes in plural, it doesn't return an object, it returns a HTML collection, right? Or a node list. You can then maybe perform any method, any array method you want, or you can loop through it, you can get the length and stuff like that, right? Again, document is an object. If you find one element, it's still an object. You can use object methods, but if you find a list of elements, you have to use array. It's an array or a node list, right? Yeah, so again, I've just been talking about methods on the document object, right? Methods. So like I said, if you can just understand that the DOM is just all about this document object, right? Let me see if I can just take this off, all this off. The DOM is just about these document methods, and everything you can do or play around with is in this document object as a method, right? So just kind of get familiar with it or just play around with it and learn the basics or the most used or the common accessing method, right? Finding elements, changing elements, and adding and deleting elements. If you can understand all the methods on this page, right? Get elements by ID, tag names and class names, inner HTML attributes, then change style. I don't want to focus more on CSS with JavaScript right now. We just need to learn how to manipulate HTML with JavaScript. So if you can kind of get all these most common or basic syntax, you're going to be fine. Then one last thing before I take questions, I did DOM element, right? DOM, changing HTML. Yeah, already done inner HTML, right? Changing value of an attribute, I already did that. Dynamic HTML content, right? Okay, so if I play around with this now, if I copy this, so this is just the same thing I did with date during my that first, the good morning Sammy, good afternoon Sammy. So let me just see what this does and I'll explain. Okay. But it doesn't count. Okay, yeah. So this just kind of outputs, it says dynamic HTML content, right? So any day this page is opened, it shows the updated date, right? So if I refresh this, it's going to change the seconds. It's counting, right? It's going to change the milliseconds, sorry, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth, right? So they're just trying to show you how to do dynamic HTML content. You can do that with JavaScript, right? So I want to go to forms. Let me see if we can talk about forms. I know we did HTML forms back then. Let me see. Okay, so these are the kind of stuff. Yeah, not valid. Automatic form validation. So I don't want to go into this now, right? So I just said I was going to talk about DOM and events. I'm going to breeze through events, right? Before I take questions, or let me just take questions now. So we're going to just go over events. So if I think I saw a hand up, Gito, you can ask your question.
Okay, hi, Sam. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, this is from what you've been doing, right? The append, especially the adding and deleting, when you can add or delete HTML document from the JavaScript. So I know you can actually document your process through commenting, but if you're working with a team on the right project, on a large project, especially for text, right? If you make changes from the JavaScript, I know it alters the return value, but it doesn't take out the initial text from
from the
the
HTML.
HTML. So, okay, just for if you go back to stuff like that, I can imagine it can be confusing. So, is there any other way that other than just say commenting that can be sorted out, especially if it doesn't take out the initial text from the
So
original
basically,
code?
rather than using dynamic JavaScript to change HTML content, why not comment it out? Is that your question? Are you doing it too?
Okay, because I know commenting can help, but just for other people as well, if you're working with a team and I see something on HTML and I'm seeing something different on script, how does, I don't know. I know there is no way that it can automatically delete it or something, but I don't know if you get my point, sir.
Yeah, I get your point, right? So maybe if someone else comes here and I have good morning, Sammy, and in JavaScript or in the website, the person is saying good evening, Sammy, right? And maybe the JavaScript file is so large, he might not know where it was manipulated, right? So so that's why you said when you're in a team. So like I said, there are different conventions and it all depends, right? So like teams I work with, let's say if we are working on a software and application, there can be 2 backend guys, 2 front-end guys, and maybe it's just you and 5 people that work on this file. And you guys might have sat down to maybe discuss requirements, drafted the flowchart, and know that this is where this is. And the point is, if you're in a team working on this, you should know what you guys did, right? So for instance, you are going into another team and they have codes you don't understand. You're going to get like maybe a documentation. If comments do not help, maybe a documentation or an onboarding and say, okay, this is the idea of this section of this app. We are getting user input from our API or our database. And if the user is from, let's say, Europe or Africa, we are going to display a hello world or stuff like that, right? So again, if it's your team, you're going to know because you guys design the requirements and design the flow. But if you're going to another team or you're going to get into someone else's work, it's either going to be documented and explained to you. And the last one is you're going to get super, I know maybe if this is new to you, it will be hard to understand. You're going to get super familiar with this, right? I'm not saying it's the best, but if there were 100 lines of code here and 1,000 lines of JavaScript, it would take me 3, 5 to 7 minutes to find what I'm looking for, because I as I'm seeing it, I'm understanding it like I'm understanding it as like a breeze, right? So aside from those 2 first options, you can I read codes, right? So if I'm giving a new task or a new project that has already been written, I have to read the code. So I'll read, okay. So this guy did this here and he changed this, right? So again, if it's your team, you guys should know where you did what and why you did it. If you're coming into another team, it will be explained to you, or maybe documentation will help. But you're going to get, if you get more familiar with it, you can read through the code and understand what was done. Was that helpful, Ngito?
Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, let me just breeze through or go through events, then maybe we can call it a day for today. But I would really want everyone to practice. I'm trying my best to create bite-sized exercises to give real-life examples of all these, but you can just come here and like, as we've talked about this in the class, if you just come here and just practicalize it daily, right? So these are kind of different from theory topics where you read and you have to read to understand, but with this, you have to actually do is to remember the commands. So I will just go to, okay. Again, the HTML DOM, it's your HTML file passed into a document or an object, sorry, and you have access to the object in this document variable. So this is a global variable, right? Document, excuse me. So please just play around with this. And if you have any questions, you can just like ask us in the group. Okay. And when we come back, maybe we're going to use DOM to build most of the exercises I want us to build, right? Like just look at this little software. Please input a number between 1 and 10. So this is just like validation. If I put 100 and submit, it's going to return a feedback, right? So with this now and your little understanding of DOM, you can fully guess what's going on here, right? So it's taking this number, saving it in a variable, checking with if statements, if this number is greater than or less than, sorry, is less than or equal to 10. If it is, then document the get elements by ID, put in valid. If not, put in not valid. So if I change this to 10 now and click on submit, you're going to see input okay. So why I don't want to get into forms now is the concept behind clicking this button and checking this is what I want to talk about, right? It's called JavaScript events. So if I go up, I think we skipped it earlier on, and go to JavaScript events, right? So HTML events are things that happen to HTML elements, right? This is another topic or another concept you're going to be using a whole lot. Like you won't escape, you're going to be using it a whole lot, right? To be able to make some stuff dynamic, you're going to be using events. So before I go into event, let me just show you an example. Let me see events from here, right? So this is basically a JavaScript event can be executed when an event occurs, like when a user clicks on an HTML element, right? So see here, it says click me. If I click on this, it changes the text, click me again. I'll click on it, it says thank you, goodbye, and it disappears, right? So this is just what you can, these are all HTML events, right? The browser gives you what we call events and feedbacks based on user input, right? So again, I'm just going to go back to our event topic and go over it. Where are you? Events. So an HTML event can be something the browser does or something the user does, okay? So events are just like things or actions that happens on or in the browser, be it from the user or from the browser. So HTML, here are some examples of HTML events, right? A web page has finished loading. Yeah, these are more powerful stuff about JavaScript, right? I can know when this page finishes loading and display something. I'm sure most of us have seen a practical example of this, some maybe blogs or some content sites. When it finishes loading, it will just pop up a form, sign up for a newsletter. Or the easy one is maybe when you're reading a website and you just try to close the tab, or maybe you just try to go to another window. If you just move your mouse out of the tab, it's just like maybe pop up something and say like, why are you leaving, or sign up for a newsletter, stuff like that, right? All those are events. The browser records all that and gives you access to it, right? So when a HTML input field was changed, like maybe applications where you're typing in your username and your password, and some form has live validation, right? So if you type in an invalid email, it will tell you your email is invalid, passwords do not match, stuff like that, right? You can get events when an input field is changed, right? Or most popularly, when a button is clicked, right? So you click, submit, you click, accept friend, click all this like SQL. And if I click on SQL, there's an event that takes me to the next page, Python and stuff like that, right? So button click is the most popular and the most used, right? But there are a whole lot of things that you can use events to do. So often when events happen, you may want to do something. JavaScript lets you execute code when events are detected, right? HTML allows event handlers attributes with JavaScript code to be added to HTML. Let me just go to a simple example, right? I'm going to click on try it yourself. So this is a button, right? And the text in the button says the time is. So if I click on this button, I already know they're going to display the time somehow, right? So this is where JavaScript events come in, right? There's an on-click event on this button. So I said the most popular among them is the button click, right? You can do so many amazing stuff when a button is clicked. If I go back and click on the button, so if you can see their code, they already set, it has its own keyword, again, JavaScript keyword. So if you go to the reserved words, you're going to see on click as one of the reserved words. It's a JavaScript keyword. So on click, so what this just means is whenever this button is clicked, run this code. Okay, so I'll just go to our code editor and try this. I am going to do 1 or 2 examples so we don't kind of do so much today. I'm going to create a button. Sure, we all know click me, right? If I go to our web page, I should have our click me button. I'm sure everyone can see this. Then what do I have here? If I put this as an attribute, so there are different ways we can use JavaScript events, right? So let me see if it talks about it here. Okay, so let me just use attributes on HTML. Then I'm going to go back to JavaScript, right? So the JavaScript file. So there are 3 ways you can do this, right? I can add it here on the HTML. I can reference the button, right? I can do give it an ID and reference it. But let me just use HTML directly, right? So if I do on click now and say on click of this button, document. Again, this is just rewriting JavaScript in HTML, right? Dot get elements by ID output. Dot inner HTML equals let me see, new. This is why I don't like writing this in. Let me see. Yeah, they are all strings. Okay. So if I save this now and go to our document, I'm going to say button click me. Sorry, I don't have an element with ID of output, right? So I'm going to have ID output. I'm going to explain this in a while in Jiffy. So if I do click me, I'm going to see today's dates, like JavaScript make it a little bit messy. I've not formatted it, but it's going to output a text I put on the onClick function in my web page, right? So basically, this is the most common or basic, and I think the one you'll be using more frequently, right? On click of a button. So whenever this button is clicked, display a date. Say this is the same logic that is used in forms, right? So if you're submitting a form, maybe you're filling your user profile, then the button should be submit, right? So when it's submitted, you can use JavaScript to do stuff, right? So we're going to be using onClick to create most of our programs, and this is the syntax, right? But this is just one way to use onClick, right? So onClick in the HTML document. But I don't want to do this because we'll be writing JavaScript in a JavaScript file, right? So if I save this and can I give this an ID of submit button? Let me just use submit button, and I go to my script file and do the same thing we know. Let's submit button, right? Equals document.get elements. Typed get elements by ID so much today. Submit button, right? So now we have a reference to the button. The way we do add events in JavaScript is the element submit button dot add event listener. Okay, or let me just do this, right? The three ways to add events to HTML. element, right? The first one is the one I just did, right? Directly on element, right? The second one is using onClick in JavaScript. I'm going to show us the differences, right? The third one is using add event listener. Okay, so again, the last one I did, I added the onClick directly on the HTML here, right? So if I do onClick on any HTML element, it mustn't be a button, right? I can do onClick on the H1, right? So if I just copy and paste this and put it on the H1, right? I need to put text right to show. And I click on it of the inner HTML. So I have to reference another, okay, no, I didn't put that. Right, so it's going to change itself, right? So I can put onClick on any HTML element. Rather than having the onClick command or the event listener command directly in the HTML file, I can move it to a JavaScript file, okay? So again, button ID submit button. I'll come to JavaScript. I'm going to get a reference of the element, right? Document.getElement by ID submit button. Then I can play around with it. I can do submit button dot onClick, right? This is the same thing I did in the HTML file, but this time I'm abstracting it to the JavaScript file. So let me just see how to use the onClick command from JavaScript. Right, so submit button dot onClick, it should be a function. Let me just add event listener directly, right? So if I do add event listener, click. This will be too complex for now, but let me just try explain it. Function. Then now I'm going to paste in my document.getElements by ID inner HTML new date. So if I do this output, I don't have an element output. Why are you not displaying? Click document.getElement output inner HTML. Okay, it's trying to mess with me right now. Submit button to add event listener. Click. Just give me a moment. Let me see why this is. Did I remove my script? Oh, I moved my script tag. Sorry. So this should, yeah, was working all along. So again, I just virtually kind of went through events and what events are. I'm going to talk about this slowly or fully tomorrow, right? So like always, today we talked about DOM, but I just kind of showed you an additional stuff, right? So we can do so much cool stuff with events, but we can't fully go into it today. But this is just how events work, right? So I can have a form, let's say to collect the user details, first name, last name, email. Then when the user finishes filling the form, I can append an event listener on the submit button, right? So when the user clicks on the submit button, I'm going to maybe do something or get the input and check if his username and password is valid, if there's already a user with that account, like some cool stuff that I'm going to just try to create use cases for. But for now, just know we've played around with all the data types, variables, functions. We've looked at DOM. I'm going to explain events tomorrow. Then when we are comfortable with all these concepts, we'll start building little applications that kind of maximizes all this, so we fully understand how all this stuff works. So if you have any questions, you can just raise your hands. About DOM, mustn't necessarily be about events. I just kind of did a sneak peek on events. If you have any questions on DOM, you can just put up your hands and let's take your questions. So Otman, hi Otman.
Hi, Sammy. Thank you for all that you do. Can you please go over console.log, please? The use case.
All right. So yeah, like I said, right, console.log. So console.log, it's a, let me not say global, it's a JavaScript inbuilt object or function, like object here is an object that helps you communicate with the developer console, right? So again, we are developers, and most of this, there are so many stuff that are built to kind of help us debug and access our codes, right? A normal user will not, it's, in fact, I'm not sure it's everyone, or a normal user will not know that there's what we call a debug console, right? So console.log is just, the object has utility tools you can use to debug your code, and maybe see, is for development, right? It's for, you can't use it to display stuff on the web page and stuff like that. And every programming language has it, right? I think the one for Apex is system.debug. Okay, it's not here, so I can't type it. Yeah, I can type it, but my autocorrect will help me. So basically, a console.log, it's a JavaScript object for developers, right? It helps developers kind of debug their code. So if you notice previously, I was looking for what was wrong with my code. Let me just go back, right? And I was console.log high. So this is just like how you debug, right? So I didn't know why this wasn't showing. Then I know even if I was referencing this thing wrongly or something was wrong with my code, console.log will always output something to the console, right? So it was when I tried console.log and it did not work, then I now checked, I saw I did not, like, this file is not connected. So the console object just gives you some utilities to help debug your code. I can do console.error, console.one, info assert, and many other stuff. But in a nutshell, it's a developer like help object to maybe play around with debugging your code and checking what's wrong and what's not. It's the user never sees any console output except they maybe open up your console log.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Can you please touch on inner HTML? That will be my last question.
Okay, so I'm just going to clear this. Don't know if, let me just comment this out. So basically, right, inner HTML, if I go back to the content and just scroll, HTML DOM methods. So the easiest way to, so the inner HTML property, right? It just changes the inner HTML of a HTML content. So let me just show you an example, right? If I have a H1 element with this is awesome, right? And I go, let me do what's like, I'll create a variable, let's maybe elements or our elements equal to document 2. I'm going to try get that element back, right? What was the name? Output. So if I, for example, now I'm getting a reference to this element. I'm not doing anything with it yet, right? So maybe previously I was doing everything on one line. So I'm just getting a reference to this element. If I console log it now, console.log for us to see, and I go to my browser and console, I'm going to see that exact element as it is in my HTML file. So what you should know is this is the inner HTML or text content. And the inner HTML command is a property to use to manipulate this inner HTML, inner text content, right? So if I do elements.inner HTML equal to, let's say something else, something nice. Okay, it's going to change the text content, like the inner text of that. Yeah, makes sense now, right?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, Tolex.
Thank you, Sammy. Sorry, I will just take you back a little bit if you don't mind. It's not regarding to this class. If you can go to JS comparison operators. Yeah. So I just wanted to explain these, the first one equal to, and the one under that is saying not equal value or not equal type.
Okay, these two, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let me see how that. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to use my console directly now. Can you see my console here?
Yes.
Yeah, so equal operator, right, just checks for equality. It does what we call coercion, right? It converts one of the values to maybe the other data type, if you understand data types. So I'm just going to kind of try take it slow. I'm not going to save any of them in variables, right? So I'm just going to do 5 equal 5. This is going to return true, right? But see something, if I do 5 equal 5 in a string, guess what is going to return? True. Why is that? Because 5 is a number. If you followed us with doing data types, right? 5 is a number, but this 5 is a string. Do you understand?
Yes.
What the double equal sign does, it doesn't check for data types. So if you look at this, it says it checks for equal value and equal type. So the double equal sign only checks the value, right? It coerces them into both of them strings and checks, 5 is equal to 5. Okay, true. But if I do 5 equal to 5 in string, it's going to be returned false, because once you use the triple equal sign, you tell JavaScript, I want to be very sure, like I'm building maybe a school portal, a mass, I need to be very sure before I run my calculation that this 5 is equal to this 5. But from the look of things, this is a string and this is a number data type. So they are not of the same type. It returns false. So if you want to do a weak equality check, you can use the double, like you're not very particular about the both data types being equal, right? You can use the double equal sign and it's always going to return true, right? But if you try double equal sign with something that is not 5, it's going to return false. So where it's going to return true is if they are of the same value. If they are the same value, return true. But if they are the same value and not of the same type, so this is a string and this is a number, it's going to return false. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that should be all. Okay, so again, you can just practice or try go back to DOM. I think it's basically straightforward. It's more straightforward than comparison, loops, if else, though we're going to kind of create more examples for all this, right? Just try play around with DOM, change whatever you want to change, like play around with, okay, for example, now let's say I maybe I did not practice with a HTML document that has enough content. If I inspect this page now and go to console, I think we should have a class on, what's it called? These JavaScript dev tools, right? I can do from here, right? Documents. I think we're going to have a class on dev tools, document.get elements. So I don't know any of their ID. Let me just get all elements by tag name. So I want to get all H1 elements. If I check, do they have H1? Why won't they have? They just have one H1, right? Okay. SEO stuff. Let me look for P tags. I'm very sure there are many. If I go for P tags, yeah, I'm going to see there are 19 P tags. So you can play around with if you don't play around with your own HTML file, you can go on other sites and just play around with it from the console. But I think we're going to do a class on how to use the console. So if you don't know how to use that, just avoid that for now. But just create a HTML file, link a JavaScript file, then try using all the documents.getElements commands we did, right? So replace the text, replace header, and just do some dynamic stuff. I'm going to create some exercises that we're going to be working on during our classes. So yeah, our time is up. I think we're going to stop here. I'm going to see you guys tomorrow, and I'll send the little exercises I wanted to send last week across before morning. Okay, so thank you.
Sorry, I have a question, Sam. Sorry. That if you want to link HTML to JavaScript, I know you said a script. Can you use something else to say, okay, maybe text, then space source equals to dots file javascript.js? Would that work?
Text.
Yes, like the same way you are linking it, just change that script to like text, then still leave the rest.
No.
Then the file is going to be text. It has to be script.
Yeah, it has to be script.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about, so we're done, right? So I wanted to talk about something, right? So there's you, okay. So we're going to look at I'm going to talk about that with events tomorrow, right? So I think we've exhausted our time. So thank you very much. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Sammy. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.